the introductory sequence of Final Fantasy VII is something truly incredible.
Yeah.
Just sensationally done on every level, from sound to visuals to pacing and everything else. Yeah. And the music is one of the most inspired pieces I've ever heard. That that starts off and he jumps off the train and I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be good.
This is
this is gonna be good.
We're 1 minute into the game.
I don't think I have a choice before we start today's episode other than to acknowledge my bias on this one.
I couldn't help it either.
For the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a history of the music of Final Fantasy. We've gone through the NES era, the Super Nintendo era, and we are now into the PlayStation era, which is just very hard for me not to be visibly and obviously, I don't know, in favor of. Clearly, this is the one that, for me, these were the best games. It was the best era of the series.
Yeah.
That's not to knock Final Fantasy VI, which we have done a full series on, and which I love.
Love that game.
And you can go watch all of our thoughts on how much we love that game. Yeah. It is simply to say that this is where it really, really, really took off.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion. Also, within that era, within the 7 through 9 PlayStation era, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game in the series. And so if I go on at length about that one, and I'm not as enthusiastic about others, that is why. You can't account for taste.
Right.
It's just something that, you prefer what you prefer or whatever. But there is something just truly, truly magical about this specific set, these three right here.
Yeah, these three.
I can't help it. I can't help but feel that way, and so that might come through, but I will do my best to give each game its fair due.
It's like the perfect balance of the extreme limitations of composing music in a video game format, but enough freedom to still mostly be able to do whatever you want. This is like that perfect balance.
Yeah, sweet spot.
Yeah, especially for someone who was doing SNES music before this. To jump into this, this must have been very freeing for Uematsu.
Okay, so let's get started here with Final Fantasy VII.
Oh my gosh, man.
The
soundtrack's so good.
It's
so good.
It's magnificent.
Yeah.
It's magnificent. I listened all the way through it twice this week. And, one thing that I have read in the past online, I mean, this happens for anything where there's a popular series and there's one in particular that sold the best or seemed to be the most popular of that series.
And then everyone else gets a little upset because it seems to suck all the attention into just itself. And then everyone's like, but my stuff's still cool too,
You cannot say anything nice about Final Fantasy VII on the internet without bitter Final Fantasy VI fans or else otherwise coming in and being like, it's overrated or whatever.
Right.
Fine. Like, that's fine.
It's going to happen.
But one thing that I had read a lot, because I've jumped around quite a bit in terms of deciding what is my favorite soundtrack of the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah.
You ask me, 1 year I might say Final Fantasy VI, and you ask me another year, I'll say, Final Fantasy VIII for sure, or ask me another time and I'll say Final Fantasy X or something like that. So I've kind of jumped around.
Yeah, I have a bit too. 9 was actually my favorite. Probably about 15 years ago, I learned like a bunch of 9 songs on guitar and piano and stuff, and I just was way into 9.
Yeah, and like we said at the beginning of this series, I mean, they are all so good, and it is so difficult to even try to rank them. That's why we decided not to rank them.
Yeah,
but with Final Fantasy VII, after even doing research into it, for this episode and things like that. I've read things in the past like, oh, there's a bunch of tracks here that just feel like filler tracks or whatever. There's a few standouts, of course, but like there's a lot here. And I just don't think I could disagree with that anymore. I don't think it's possible. There's not one track that I skipped while listening to this or like, I know that one, but like every single one feels so appropriate for where it's placed.
Yeah.
It has the most unique sound.
Oh, yeah, it does actually. I agree with
the
that.
entire series.
I agree with that. Yep.
And as I was paying attention to the use of certain instruments and, you know, why those might have been chosen and even reading some of the reasons why they were, it just comes together in a way that I think, as I'll read from a quote from Uematsu here, there's a little bit of a lightning in a bottle within a series that is a lightning in a bottle.
That's true.
With Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
And it has a real strong sense of identity, and it's just so cohesive. So I want to read a couple of things here. This comes from, of course, the essays that I have written for the Final Fantasy Retrospective series, and then there will be a few quotes within that. In reflection of the game's story, the music takes more of a gritty and serious tone, though, as usual with Nobuo Uematsu, it still features a variety of genres, styles, and emotional beats. The results fuel a world that is rich with detail, bringing little Lego men and women to life in a way that seems impossible. Whether players find themselves in the slums of Midgar, face-to-face with the president of an authoritarian megacorporation, conversing with monastic scholars far from civilization, or even just enjoying the fun and games of a Vegas-style theme park, Uematsu guides players through the story with prowess and finesse that makes his work both invisible yet foundational to informing the identity of the work. What's even more impressive is how he did this while maintaining a firm grasp on the game's core theme, weaving it into the flow of the story in ways that can only be described as masterful. This was true of his work on Final Fantasy VI as well, and showcased not only the budding maturity of Uematsu as a composer, but also of video games as a storytelling medium. And this is the quote from Uematsu here. Ever since 5 or maybe 6, this thing is being created with the ultimate goal to be a game plus something else I cannot describe. If you listen to the music in Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll notice short sequences of music being looped. But in 5 and 6, you'll notice the people creating the music are becoming aware of film soundtracks. At the time, we realized that we were going for something more than just a game. I think that is very, very true for 5 and 6, and is just even to the next step, the next level here.
It's like hyper true.
It's clear that they're thinking more along those lines, right? Like you think of music from NES games where it is a short loop.
Yeah.
It's a short piece of music. It's maybe 25 to 30 seconds long.
Most of them, yeah.
It's an area theme or just a level or something like that. And it just loops and loops and loops and loops.
Yeah.
And it's got high energy or whatever it might be. But rarely did it move in its states, emotional states, where it's going to be high energy and positive, but maybe like take a little bit of a turn and make you feel something a little different. Almost a story, telling a story, but through the way the music moves from one section to the next.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And of course, he began thinking this way in terms of how he composed Final Fantasy V and VI, like he's talking about. Mm-hmm. But I think, as we'll get into in a minute with 7, it was just the next level of that. They were progressively getting deeper and deeper into this level of storytelling and this level of thinking with each game that they were making at this point.
I really like that line there where he says it just slowly seemed to dawn on him in the middle of the SNES era that we aren't just making games, right? That there's something deeper going on here, right? Uematsu, as we talked about in a previous episode, he had thoughts about leaving the gaming industry after maybe 3 or 4, and wondering like, hey, maybe I'll do movies or something, like he had mentioned before, something more respectable or something like that. And it seems like around that time he had that realization of like, wow, games are deeper than I thought, and let's make a career out of this, and let's stick it out, right? And I'm so glad he made that realization. But also, he's like, that's right. Like it's just accurate that there's a lot more to games than I think a lot of people give them credit for. Even many of the people who work on them.
Yes.
Right. And it's like everyone kind of has to go through this moment of discovery of like, whoa, this medium's deep, really deep. Holy cow. Let's see how far down we can go.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like Uematsu had that. And I agree. 7 is where he just like goes as far down. He just reaches as deep as he can go.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
Yeah. I have a great quote along these lines of the developers realizing what they are making is way deeper than they thought that it was.
That's so
when
cool.
we get to FF9 in particular.
Oh, good.
Excuse me. He goes on here, the music and field scenes where the characters walk around have a unique flavor that no other RPGs had in the past. We intentionally eliminated the up-tempo and encouraging you to embark on the journey type factors that usual RPG music has. Instead, some parts of the music will rise melodiously. Some parts will make you feel insecure, therefore creating various expressions within the same field music. I assume players will get a different feel from it compared to previous RPGs. To tell the truth, I hope so, since that is my personal experimentation. So, again, especially with a lot of classical music, you have a piece, it's not composed in nearly the same way as, say, a piece of popular, pop music, where you have your verse and your chorus, and then you go back to the verse, and it's the same chord progression. And you go, and you just have like 3 or 4 parts that more or less,
maybe a bridge once,
a
to
bridge
make it
that goes
kind of
in between.
Yeah, so it's A B A B C B A or something like that, or no, A B A B C B. C A B, and then it's it. It's very structured,
very structured and formulaic, and you move to here, here, back to here, here, and the lyrics will kind of change, but you're repeating a lot of the same parts. With classical music, it's moving between, and I don't have the correct musical terms. I did not study music theory, and I have kind of purposefully stayed away from it throughout my life for reasons actually inspired by Uematsu himself, which I intend to get into a little bit more here in a minute, as to why a lot of his stuff is as unique and experimental and cool as it is, because he wasn't classically trained in this way and did not think along the lines of musical theory when he writes his music. But it moves in ways that are surprising and that tell stories, and that doesn't just loop around into like the same thing, multiple times. And while I'm not saying that video game music, particularly from this game, is exactly like that, because it does loop, it has to loop into itself. It moves into more parts, like he's saying, where you might start with, what did he say here? Music that will rise melodiously, but then some parts it will move into a part that makes you feel insecure, therefore creating various expressions with the same field music. I feel like that is a direct call to the main theme of Final Fantasy VII. Oh, okay. There's a part kind of in the middle of that where it gets real tense and just kind of like uncertain and anxious feeling, right in the middle of it, what was like a really beautiful, kind of slow theme. The world map theme, as you're running around the world map, is not the, how did he put it? It was actually really funny. Encouraging you to embark on the journey type.
Okay. So it's not as exciting. It's not like FF1, right?
No, it's not going for that. It's got this very slow string-driven, sort of beautiful melody, but then it gets into this kind of like darker, really anxious sort of segment, and it kind of moves between these different feelings. And so I could hear exactly what he was talking about when I read that quote. He goes on, from the first Final Fantasy up to Final Fantasy V, the music has had a European atmosphere, the north, castles, blue skies. But Final Fantasy VI started to break away from that, and Final Fantasy VII begins with a new image, a dirty city of the future. And so I was thinking the music could change too. I personally like a lot of different musical styles, so I saw this game as a chance to show parts of myself which I had not been able to express before. This, to me, is really at the heart of Final Fantasy VII's musical identity. There are certain instruments in particular that he uses here that give it all of its unique personality and flavor. And so one of those things is this sort of choral sound font that he uses, this sort of like chorus or these voices. In conjunction with like a bell and a tambourine,
yes, of course.
And like a piano that like hit together. It's kind of hard to explain. I'll actually show it off here in a second. And then just kind of this fat like bass.
Yes, that's a big one. Yeah, the Turks and
and it creates this really industrial, dark,
that's true,
kind of sound. There's even a certain sound. I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like a release of steam, which I'll show off here in a minute, that he just uses as texture kind of in the background of certain tracks in Midgar that just give this place this dungy, mechanical, industrial feel. That's very ominous and very dark. And that sort of sits, as particularly for the early hours of the game, as the heart of its musical identity. And it is so different.
That's potent.
As far as a texture goes, from anything he had ever done before. And it made Final Fantasy VII, to me, because again, music, as I've been saying throughout this series, does a lot to sort of carry the way that the player is meant to feel and the emotions that the characters feel and the impact of the story.
Especially when you're dealing with Lego people.
Yes, you really need that.
Yes, you need that emotional. You need to get the emotion somehow, and you don't get it so much through the eyes.
Yeah.
You're going to need to get it through the atmosphere.
Yeah. And it creates just a thick atmosphere right from the get-go. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing I have heard, not only from this series, but in the whole industry, that sounds anything like this.
Yeah, it's very unique. You know, there's also something about the industrial, the mechanical sounds, about how Midgar has replaced nature and meaning with metal and wheels, right?
Yeah.
And this is your new home. Enjoy it. Here's your pittance. Now go work at the plant for 10 hours and come home with soot covering your face, because that's the trade-off that we made for you. On behalf of you, we made this trade-off, and your lives are meaningless now, and you're separated from nature to a ridiculous degree, and you have to work really hard all the time forever in order to keep up with the demands of the industry that you're surrounded with, that sometimes gives you things that are nice, but also has taken away a lot that you once had long ago. And the way you described the music just now, it almost like conveys that just through the instrument choice and the palette and the type of music that Uematsu is using, gives you that feeling, which is exactly the theme of exactly what this game's going for. And you just feel it just within the music itself. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and so the game starts in Midgar. You're there for several hours of gameplay at the very beginning. And so you have a lot of that kind of feel to the music, but then he will juxtapose that with the nature and things like that, particularly when you get into Cosmo Canyon or other places where there's a big spiritual element. And so he just does this so brilliantly in the musical DNA, the identity of the game,
Right.
that lends so much power to the storytelling that's going on here. Which again, the theme of Final Fantasy VII is about life, the sanctity of life,
Yeah.
and appreciating it, and its fleetingness, its impermanence.
Right.
This is something that Sakaguchi had been really wrestling with since the death of his mother,
Right.
which happened around the time they were making Final Fantasy III, and this had been on his mind. And he had come up with his Gaia hypothesis, which we talked about, if you haven't seen our podcast on Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within.
Yeah.
That movie also has a lot of similar thematic elements that this game has, where the planet itself is alive and has a soul and things like that.
So. Yeah.
But these were thoughts he had been developing for many, many years, and feelings he had been wrestling with about life and death and things like that, which this game became the vehicle for now writing a story that conveys those feelings. And it's just brilliant the way that Uematsu caught hold of that vision and the way that he captures those things in the score. So the score is massive. It spans 85 tracks on 4 discs with a combined duration of over 4.5 hours. The main theme of the game, along with Eris' theme, are 2 of the most beloved pieces in the series, capturing the duality of hopeful perseverance in the face of terrible loss and regret, a feeling that the game epitomizes so well throughout. In other words, it encapsulates life in profound ways and makes sure its audience understands its value. Okay, I have a couple more quotes here from Uematsu. While I was working on Final Fantasy V, there were already rumors about the next generation hardware, but I didn't know what to expect. I'd heard rumors that games were going to be on CD-ROMs, so the first thing that came to my mind was, oh great, now I can hire singers and can create tracks with vocals on them. But I tried it out for Final Fantasy VII, and even though I had enough space to include vocals, they made it so the game took longer to load between scenes.
Of course.
Yeah. And I didn't want to do that just for the music. With the game starting and stopping as you play, I didn't think that made sense. So I gave up on that idea and made it work so that all the sounds would load when you first booted up the game. So that it didn't need any loading time while playing. All the sounds were loaded into a bank and ready
for
to
the
call
music.
on.
Yeah. Very good.
I was particularly invested in that idea. Because we did that, though, the sound quality wasn't as high as it could have been. And when the game shipped, I compared the quality of Final Fantasy VII with another game released around that time, and the quality of another title and of that other title was really high. He's talking about Suikoden.
No way.
Yeah,
Nice.
This is admitted in another interview, but that's exactly what he's talking about. So Mika Higashino, who I have called the best
She's
composer in the history of video games in the past. He heard Suikoden's soundtrack and was just like, "Oh man, like this is so good. I should have done this." So on Final Fantasy VIII, he kind of
8
like
and 9, he did a
he
little more.
gives up on this a little bit and he's
Yeah.
like, "Okay, let's go record like an actual orchestra for some tracks."
Right, and get more of that. The choir vocals.
Yeah.
In 8's got a good amount of that.
Yeah, we'll write an actual song with it, and we'll hire a singer to come in and sing it and things like that. But it didn't work for this game in part because of this loading issue he thought would be a problem.
Yeah.
Which didn't end up being as much of a problem as he thought for later
People
titles.
were okay with the load times, basically.
Yeah. And then also they just didn't feel that a singer at the end of Final Fantasy VII would maybe be the best fit for like the way that story ends and the way it comes together.
That's probably a fair point.
Yeah, I think I agree with that too. So he says, after comparing our sound quality with theirs, I thought, okay, maybe I should loosen up a little bit and go for higher quality, even if it hurts the gameplay flow a little bit for Final Fantasy VIII. I don't remember the specific title I was jealous of. Yes, you do. But it was from the Suikoden series, whichever title it was that was out at the time. It loads a lot, and I was thinking that it stopped the game too often, but the quality was really high. That was kind of the trigger to make things a little different. So he says, I used a keyboard and guitar for the basic compositions, and I read the story and script as I composed. But there are so many songs this time that I really worried that I would run out of time. There were something like 100 songs needed. I'd compose, then program it in, and if it was wrong, I'd revise it, rinse and repeat. I write the music out first and then program it into the sequencer, but there was no guarantees that the PlayStation hardware would have the kind of sound I was looking for, and the sound quality might be very different. For that reason, there ended up being a lot of unused songs. So he says he wrote over 100, but there were only 85 that were actually used in the final game, right?
To put that in perspective, by the way, if development time for a game like this is something like 1 year,
Yep.
he's writing a new song every 2 days.
Yeah.
Or every other day.
It's crazy.
He has to write a new song. And that's assuming he's getting everything right each time. There were, I'm sure, a lot of feedback where it was like, change this, do that differently, don't do this, make it different. You're not getting the right mood or whatever. Okay, great. Rewrite the song. How many songs did he actually? He probably wrote a song a day, like a new song a day. So these songs that you're hearing were just like thought of and conceived and written and produced and programmed all in a single day or two. And you're telling me there's no misses on that soundtrack. That is
I know.
That's some divine inspiration right there. That's just wild.
It's almost inconceivable.
Yeah.
And it also helps me understand why, and we'll get to this next week, when Final Fantasy X came around, he admits to feeling uninspired and wanting some help. And so he goes and recruits some other composers to come along and help with the soundtrack on 10 and moving forward. But I can't imagine writing at that pace for like a solid
for like
4
decades.
years in a row.
Yeah, just insane.
Well, I guess if you go back to the early titles, but there weren't as many tracks on those. I mean,
fair point.
This is
and
way more.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible. It's incredible what he did in the time frame that he did it. He goes on here. The music in this game is, like those in previous games, generated from an internal sound source. Some people say, since you're using CD-ROM, why don't you do a studio recording, at least for the movies, like the FMVs?
Oh, right.
I wouldn't prefer making portions of the game gorgeous. I would rather concentrate on balancing out the quality of music throughout the game.
That's funny because in that regard, he kind of differs from the direction that the game itself took.
Like the artists and the animators,
yeah. I don't know.
Who made the FMVs really different from
the Lego people.
Mm-hmm. I would rather concentrate on balancing the quality of the music. Any one of the music, images, system, or scenario should not stand out too much. That's funny. Again, they should be kept uniformed and leveled out in quality.
Dude, he should direct games. It could be that the music not straying too far from its own, rules and, this unity that he's talking about, this system where nothing shines too much in different ways. Everything is kind of on a level playing field. It could be that what holds FF7 together, despite its various artistic decisions, is that the music is a constant of a constant quality the whole time. Whereas if he did have the music change and then you go back to running around the world and it's, lower quality, people may not, it may have accentuated the differences a little bit more. Whereas the way he chose to do it, it helps to kind of unify everything into a cohesive whole a little bit.
I think I understand the thought process. I'm not sure that people minded too much when we moved on to FF8 or FF9.
I think you're right.
Where, it did
I think
jump.
You're right.
But, I mean, I don't know. I could see where he was coming from. And this was the first game they were making on the PlayStation.
Yeah, you never know what to expect.
And then, your thoughts change as you do the first one and think, well, maybe we could do this. Well, maybe we could do that. Things, again, you get better as you go, right?
Yeah.
We've always been trying to accomplish this. The people professional in each field should always try to level out those elements which stand out and those which are low. Okay, so I wrote here, Uematsu's approach to composing the game's music was to treat it like a film soundtrack and compose songs that reflected the mood of the scenes rather than trying to write strong melodies to define the game, as he felt the approach would come across too strong when placed alongside the game's new 3D visuals. As an example, he composed the track intended for the scene in the game where Aerith Gainsborough... Okay, let's pause here for a second because this
Everyone knows what you're about to say.
I know that everybody knows what I'm about to say.
But
just in case you don't,
who don't,
skip ahead about a minute. So give people enough time to do that. So Aerith's death scene is what he's talking about here.
Yeah.
So he decided to write something that was sad but beautiful rather than something overtly emotional, creating what feels is more of an understated feeling. And so you think about that. It's not like this
I know exactly what
rousing
you mean. I know
or
exactly
like
what you mean.
really intense. It's just a really subtle, soft, sad piece. Just
Yes,
it's just a
solo
piano line.
Yeah. And
right?
and a lot of silence.
Yeah.
Right? Like the dun-dun-dun, and then nothing for like 3 seconds. Dun-dun-dun,
Right.
and
It's
then
just
nothing.
her
And
theme
it
there,
does kind of swell as it moves into it, but at least at the beginning movements of that piece, yeah, it's very plays a lot with silence and it's very minimal.
Yeah. So, yeah. He's thinking on a different level.
Yeah.
He's thinking on a very, very different level from where we started in terms of these games, where the music was defining the game completely in game one. Because they didn't have a story really. It was kind of there, but there was so little text and so little actual narration or storytelling going on or characters telling you much that the music was more or less telling you everything.
Yeah.
It was defining what you feel about what's going on. And here he's now completely shifted. The first piece that Uematsu composed for the game was the opening bombing mission theme. And game director Yoshinori Kitase showed the opening cinematic to him to, get him started on the project. The track was well received in the company after he finished it, which gave Uematsu, quote, a sense that it was going to be a really good project.
Nice.
So almost right from the start, I mean, I don't think I've seen anyone who disagrees with this. The introductory sequence of Final Fantasy VII is something truly incredible.
Yeah.
Just sensationally done on every level, from sound to visuals to pacing and everything else. Yeah. And the music is one of the most inspired pieces I've ever heard.
So it seems to me like they rendered the CG out and then they gave it to him and then he composed for it and everyone just said, this is perfect.
This is awesome.
Which means that just based on whatever feedback or whatever info he had heard before, the project coming into it, everyone's on the same page, right? Yeah. That everything fit together and all of the artists and the director and the sound and the music and the technical story and all of the background stuff, that everything just seemed to come together and Uematsu could feel it and was like, this is going to be good.
Yeah, this
right?
is
And you
good.
could tell just from the very beginning there. And it's like no feedback. Everyone likes what he did. And he got the spirit. He caught the vision.
Yeah. I mean, that was exactly what I felt playing the game. Yeah. It starts up and it starts going that that starts off and he jumps off the train and I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be good.
This is
this is gonna be good.
We're 1 minute into the game and it's like, this is gonna be good.
This is gonna be good. Holy crap. Yeah. Right? Like that's the lightning in the bottle sort of element I'm talking about. There's just something really special about the feeling this game gives you right away. He later stated in the liner notes for the soundtrack album that the music for Final Fantasy VII was his greatest harvest to date. A really interesting way of putting that. Greatest harvest to date, right? He feel like he put on all this work. He sowed the seeds.
He sowed all these seeds.
He was, and what he reaped from that was the greatest he had yet seen. Final Fantasy VII was the first game in the series to include a track with digitized vocals. So One Winged Angel, the track has been called Uematsu's most recognizable contribution to the music of the Final Fantasy series. Though the composer did not expect it to gain such popularity. The piece described as a fanfare to impending doom.
Right, it's a strange piece and it's got weird time signatures and it's unusual but yeah, I mean, it's super recognizable and absolutely a fanfare to impending doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is said not to follow any normal genre rules.
Yes,
and it's been termed possibly the most innovative idea in the series' musical theory. This, again, I think is directly... This is contributed to directly by the fact that he is not classically trained in musical theory. So there's a really great channel out there. I don't know if you've ever seen it. 8-bit Music Theory. Have you ever watched this channel before?
I don't think so, but maybe.
It's a really good channel. So it's a guy who's clearly like studied music, understands musical theory to a level that almost nobody does. It's one of those things where unless you're really, really into music theory, a lot of it will just sail over your head. You don't really understand what he's talking about. He's not afraid to get into the really thick weeds of musical theory to explain what's happening in these video game songs, right? In these tracks from video games. And even for me, sometimes it can be a little bit too technical.
Right.
It's just like, wow, dude, like all these terms. It's really interesting. And there's a part of me that is curious to learn more music theory. But like I said, I've always almost purposefully avoided that. And it's because Uematsu wasn't thinking along those technical musical theory lines when he wrote stuff like this.
Yeah, he broke a lot of rules.
And
especially making this song.
That's why, and again, not everybody can do that, right? It's not to say that just anybody without understanding any music theory at all, and I'm not saying he doesn't. Obviously, he has learned some.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You have to know some.
Yes.
to be a composer, but to not be like a student of music theory, I think is what leads to him being able to write in this way, to where I'll read that again. It doesn't follow any normal genre rules and is possibly the most innovative idea in the series' musical history. As somebody who understands, I'm talking about the guy who runs the channel now, understands musical theory, he will often be like, wow, I just would never have thought to do what he did here because it's just not in musical theory the way we think about, tonics or like resolving. Because in the most basic terms in musical theory, a lot of times music is set up to ask a question or to leave a phrase feeling open and then to come back in your next phrase and resolve it or answer the question. So it's a question and answer. And
I like that.
Even in the way the prelude theme is done here, and actually, no, it's more the victory fanfare, which was a mainstay as well. It had been in every game up to this point.
Yeah.
It subverts the expectations if you had been a Final Fantasy fan before in ways that are so interesting. So go watch his video on that. 8-bit Music Theories, Final Fantasy VII's victory fanfare betrays expectations or something like that. It's really, really cool to really get into the weeds on it, but I don't think he was thinking that. I think he's just feeling those things and tries to like, let's just like take that one note in this triad down a half step to foreshadow that we're not going to do what I usually do on the back half of this fanfare. We're actually going to do something really crazy with this one.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's play that in a minute. But anyway, he's not following genre rules here.
Right. On the topic of One-Winged Angel, I remember watching an interview with him years ago, and I believe it was about Advent Children in particular. But they were talking about One-Winged Angel. He said, well, I had a unique challenge with that particular song that I had two choices. I could either write a pop like rock song and then add in an orchestra, right, which is what something like Nightwish does or something like that. Or I could write the classical musical piece and then add in the rock elements later on. And what he was saying is that, and this is so funny, it's like an epiphany he had. He goes, I just realized it wasn't working, nothing was working. What I realized was you have to write for neither of them. And I'm like, that made sense to him to say that. And I'm thinking, I'm not where he's at, right? Like I can't do that. I can't think, oh, perfect. Just write for neither of them. And now you've got a dope song that is genre defying, right? But like what? the way he explains it is hilarious, because to anybody else, it's like you just got rid of the genres, and then it made sense to you to do what you did. Whereas in my mind, you just threw the world into chaos, and I don't even know what you would do if you're not going to write for any particular genre. Anyways, it's fascinating stuff. But that's the way he thinks, and if you can follow him there, then you may understand him and why he did what he did. But I cannot. I just bask in the glory of the song afterwards, and just wonder why it works so well.
Yeah. He's thinking on a different level.
Yeah.
Uematsu approached the piece, which accompanies the final battle of the game, in a different manner than previous boss tracks, as he felt that using his normal approach would cause unfavorable comparisons to his well-received Final Fantasy VI boss tracks. He instead tried to take a different approach, inspired by The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky, to make a more classical track, and by rock and roll music from the late 60s and early 70s to make an orchestral track with destructive impact. He spent 2 weeks composing short, unconnected musical phrases and then arranged them together into a song, an approach he had never used before or since.
That's very interesting. Or since.
Yeah.
So he just came up with little,
he just
like licks
wrote this
here
phrase,
and there.
wrote this phrase, wrote this phrase, wrote
And then
this
was
phrase,
like,
not connected to each other. Let's find a way to make those connect.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Crazy.
And it's also telling for him to say that he did not do it again.
Yeah. The lyrics of One Winged Angel, a Latin choral track that plays at the climax of the game, were taken from the medieval poetry that forms the basis of Karl Orff's Camina Burana, specifically Estuans Interius, or O Fortuna.
O Fortuna. It's the,
Yeah.
statue of Big Dog with fleas.
Yes. And there's a couple others there that I won't embarrass myself any further trying to pronounce Latin words. Uematsu has stated that the intro of One Winged Angel is based on Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze, that the piece revolves around the image of Sephiroth, and that despite the chorus and orchestra, he still thinks of it as a rock piece.
Okay, interesting.
He said in a 2005 interview that One Winged Angel is his favorite tune from the soundtrack, and in 2004 that it was his favorite battle theme from any Final Fantasy game. All right.
Very cool.
That brings me to the end of my notes on Final Fantasy VII.
All right.
We have to listen to a few of these.
Let's dive
to
in.
hear some of what we were talking about there in practice. So the prelude is amazing. Every Final Fantasy prelude is amazing. But
music levels, should we?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Because this isn't the NES giant freaking square and triangle waves blasted into our ear. I don't know what it is about this one in particular, though. I don't know if it's slightly slower.
It feels slightly slower. It also it sounds like a harp, but not.
It's almost
completely.
synthy.
It sounds a little bit more like a synth.
I think that's what the difference is. And that's another element I didn't talk about before when I was listing those instruments that kind of like more or less create the identity of Final Fantasy VII's musical DNA. Synth is a huge part of it. And it's not something he used basically ever in the soundtracks before this. It was because this is a futuristic kind of city,
right?
That synth element was introduced, and so you have a lot of synth mixed in with that choral element, like I said, that bell, tambourine, and the piano that kind of plays, and that fat bass, and the synth. And there's a synthy element to this version that just makes it feel different.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, because it is otherwise more or less the same piece as the previous Final Fantasy preludes. And again, maybe it's that it's just a little slower or something like that. But there's just a richness to this one that I've always kind of appreciated a lot. But no, of course, the opening bombing mission is just... I mean, this is one of the best tracks in the history of video games. And I'm going to have to... There we go. Skip forward a little bit there. because it's all synced up with this sequence, this long kind of drawn out sequence.
Just in the materia.
Starting
that at first it looks like stars, and then you find out it's the materia, or
it's like Mako that's sort of
that's
leaking.
what I meant. I meant some materia, but I meant the Mako kind of going up, and then you move down into the city.
Up in the city, the title of the game.
Yeah.
With the crescendo of the music there.
With Aerith before that. And
sounds very triumphant, but then we're shifting again. Right there.
Yes, you can feel the shift in music.
You're shifting into more of an anxious feeling. And this soundtrack does that a lot. It'll shift from one emotion to the other.
And that could be because he wrote these phrases so separately and then melds them together in the same song. That could be the reason for it.
There it goes. And then right here, this is just when you know, okay, this is going to be good. Like the second this part comes on, it's over. Like you're done. Like you're not going to stop playing this till it's over. It's so freaking good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get into Mako Reactor here, because this has a lot of the elements I was talking about. So you have that tambourine and the piano.
And then that synth,
boom, that rhythm, boom, 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 boom. It's a tambourine and a piano hitting at the same
Interesting.
time. Then you have that synth, and then you have that chorus. But then you hear that
steam,
part that steam kind of release.
Interesting. That's so interesting.
Like these textures.
Yeah.
Kind of going on in the background. That.
Yeah. That's funny. This is a
and
piece
then here
that
comes
I've never really
the chorus.
before.
Or sorry, not here yet. So you have strings here, but we'll probably like cut and skip forward a little bit.
Okay.
But that bell.
Oh yeah.
Or chimes or whatever it is.
Which always makes me think of Sephiroth when I hear those bells.
This is all over the game.
Yeah.
And there comes that chorus.
Yeah, the voices. That's right, yeah.
So it's these specific instruments. The synth, the bell, the tambourine and piano rhythm.
Yeah.
I think I said the chorus already. And then that like synth and bass in particular with like the rotting pizza, or not the rotting, underneath the rotting pizza, I think is the name of the track.
The bass.
Boom, 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 boom. Right? We'll get to that in a second.
I love that.
But this is so key to giving Final Fantasy VII its incredibly rich, unique identity musically in the series.
Yeah.
Nothing else in the series sounds like this.
Yes, yeah, absolutely true.
It's crazy how experimental he got here and how perfect it is for the tone of this game in particular. So I'm going to skip past. I mean, again, I did not feel a single track on this soundtrack missed, not once. I like every single one. Like Tifa's theme is great, Barrett's theme is great,
very
Anxious
good.
Heart is amazing, Lurking in the Darkness. But then I'm going to skip ahead to Shinra Corporation real quick to get back to some of this.
That feel, that unique feel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that particular Final Fantasy VII stamp of musical identity.
Yeah.
Right? You'll hear a lot of those same motifs. Here comes the chorus right here.
Yeah. And the bass and snare, it's not a bass and snare, but the sound of the drums, basically, the percussion sounds you're hearing, sound like a train or a steam engine.
Yes.
Just kind of.
It's like an industrial
it's
percussion.
very industrial. Yeah. And that elicits a certain kind of feeling, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
We'll get that kind of bell coming in here in a minute, too, which just really cements it again. You hear that bell there?
Bells.
And then the chorus.
Yeah.
This
is very cool.
It's
this is
so
a very cool piece.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it is so perfect for the setting that this story takes place in. It evokes exactly the right, I don't know, I guess what you associate, like you're saying, with trains and machines and industry, and particularly the polluting kind of industry.
Right, the dirty kind.
If you were to go into like a fuel refining factory, like these are the types of sounds you would associate with that kind of place.
Right, yeah.
Which is exactly what they're trying to evoke here, is a sort of corruption of nature, something that is taking nature, polluting it, harnessing it, but in a way that harms the planet, right? And
then there's just ominous nature as well. This just really kind of negative aspect of what you're hearing. It's villainous music, right?
Yeah, it's really it's perfect. I have always loved the hurry track here.
Yeah,
this one is so good.
Oh, sure.
I've always been a huge fan of
ticking
this.
talk kind of,
because you got that urgency created by what sounds like a metronome or ticking clock.
Yeah.
Like you got to go fast, but you're also sneaking.
That's
so
right.
It's a little subdued there. It's real staccato-y.
I love that. Yeah.
And just, oh man, like you get that sense of urgency, but it's like, but quiet while you do it, because you're like you're moving in there, but you got to go fast.
That's so good. That's
right?
so fun. I love that.
This is one of the best versions of this kind of song, which you need in almost any RPG like this.
Yeah.
You need that like quick, hurry, urgent.
Let's go. Time's ticking. Yeah.
This is probably my favorite of any kind of RPG like that. I really love it.
You know, Tifa's theme is actually my favorite.
It's your favorite on the whole
on the
soundtrack.
And it's funny because this was not a song that I remember that well from when I first played the game. Or from when you were first showing it to me, going way back. I remembered it. I heard it a lot because we kind of got like stuck in the game at the beginning.
Yes.
It's like, what do we do next? I don't know. And we're just in the bar trying to like figure out what to do. But this song, I loved all the songs from the whole game. But while I was away from home, while I was a missionary in Pittsburgh, I got my hands on the piano collections. And this is track number 1, right? And it was so funny because I couldn't have told you or hummed the song. I wouldn't have told you that I even remembered this song. It was all about Aerith's theme and probably One Winged Angel and Genova and all the rock songs, you know, Those Who Fight Further or Fight On, I think is what it's called, or The Bombing Mission. But when I put the CD in and I listened to this for the first time in a while, and I was thousands of miles away from home, just kind of having a hard time, like my grandma had just died. It was rough. And then I put in the CD and this song comes on, the Piano Collections version, and I just felt a warm blanket. You know, I was just like, this is what I needed. It's such beautiful music, and ever since then I've been like, I learned this song on the piano. This is my favorite song from the game now. But the way it came to me in a time of need for me, something that just kind of reminded me of home and was very comforting, is I'll never forget that. And it means so much to me. It's such a good song though. And then I hear it now and I just think, man, this is everything about it. It's soothing, but it has that melancholy sadness
painful.
On it. Yeah, it's painful almost. It's the perfect track in my opinion for this game. And it's so funny because this just happened to be track 1 on the Piano Collections, but it's not even a game it's not even a song I necessarily would recognize. But once I heard it, I immediately recognized. I was like, oh, this is the bar. This is Seventh Heaven. I remembered it immediately, but it's not what I thought I was going to hear first. I thought I was going to hear something else. Amazing. This will never not be my favorite song.
Well, and
I just love the beginning of this game and how you move from the bombing mission right into this. And how Cloud feels like he doesn't belong, and Barrett and Tifa have this funny relationship. He's got a kid and they're funding this thing. At first I was like, oh, they're married. I'm like, oh, they're not married. Oh, this is interesting. This is just a group of ragtag people that just kind of got together and their family, right? But not like physically, technically, biologically, but they have this, you know, the mimetic connection. They are, it's a type of family, and Cloud feels like he maybe doesn't belong, but likes it here and likes it with these people, but knows that he just can't stay, right? this song just conveys all that.
Yeah.
It conveys all that. It's all contained within the song.
Yeah.
It's homely. It's homey, but it's sad, and it's a place that maybe you have to move on from. But it's just so warm.
Yeah,
it's so good.
How fitting that is too, because again, what this game's really getting at its core. There's a lot more interviews I could read, but I'll save you. I'll read that some other video. The impermanence of life, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it's fleeting, the fact that you will lose people, the fact that you can't get them back once they're gone.
Right, yeah.
And how painful that is, and how can you take comfort in a world where that will at some point eventually catch up with you.
Yeah.
And what do you take away from what you had with that person when you were together that can give you hope for the future, that you can be appreciative of, that can help you appreciate your life and get you motivated to move into a better place in your life, while still not ever, I mean, there's still always going to be a hole left from that you can't quite fill again. And anybody who's lost someone who's close to them will understand that feeling. And that is the core of what Final Fantasy VII is trying to convey to you.
Right.
And pieces like this and many others, they kind of just have that innately in them somehow. And so I totally agree with that. So I want to go quickly to the fanfare. Of course, the battle theme is incredible.
The battle themes for 7 are they're so good. They're so good.
They're second to none. The battle themes are my favorite in the series in this game as well. But it's the fanfare specifically.
Tell me about this.
So I'm going to pause here for just a second.
Because I just went through the whole song and I'm like, yeah, it's different.
I might have to and we'd probably have to listen. We'd have to listen a little like at a higher level to be able to hear. Maybe when you're editing it, you can pause and hit on those particular notes.
Okay.
So we all know the progression of the classic fanfare back all the way in Final Fantasy I.
Yeah.
It started there. Dun 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 dun. That's the first part.
Yeah.
So that is retained in this.
Okay, right.
But there are just a couple of notes kind of thrown into certain parts of that progression that are a little flat. Like it's not enough to change how you receive that. It's still what you expected, but it's just a hint, just this little tiny hint that something different. He's setting up a different progression on the back half of that is not going to be what you expect. Because it's supposed to go dun 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 dun. Very upbeat, and like in a major, kind of chord progression, exciting, positive, sort of like celebratory feel to it.
Yeah, because you're racking up that XP, right?
This has a totally different second side of it that he sets up with just two notes in particular. Again, it's not a note, it's a chord, but on the melody of it, dun 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 dun, is the same. But he pairs a couple of notes in there with some accompanying harmony that will foreshadow something real different's about to come. And so you can't help people be like, ooh, that's interesting. And then you're hit with that second part, like, whoa, what the freak is that? But it's, in my opinion, way better.
Interesting.
I love the fanfare from this game so freaking much.
I hear it.
And then it hits with this part.
And this part.
And it's just like, whoa, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And I love this too, this drawn out. With those strings there, they're just kind of...
It's an element of wonder that's pulling you in.
But let me go back.
I hear that tambourine too.
Real quick. So you can hear it on the last note of the first part. Dun, 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 dun. There's just this really slight element of like a flat note thrown into that changes its character a little bit. But there's also one other note in there. I'll point it out. Here it comes. right there. Da, 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 da.
Yeah,
so you'll hear
go
it there,
back.
and then you'll hear it on the last note of that. So
Okay.
let's try to listen. It's
Yeah,
not resolved.
that's so
It's
interesting.
not resolving where it should
It's
be.
not going dun dun dun. It's going dun dun.
It's hitting on the note
Yeah.
that is supposed to resolve that section, but it's not feeling resolved.
It doesn't feel resolved.
Right?
You're right.
Because
That's very
it's
good.
going to move into something that you're not expecting yet.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't I feel resolved? Or I'm so,
Yeah.
because the answer to the question
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
in the second part.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Right? Like, and you're like, holy cow, that's crazy.
That's fascinating.
So what's supposed to be triumphant and resolved isn't, which just sets you up to be blown away by this part.
Yeah.
And it is, that's one of the coolest pieces of music ever written for video games. Just this part right
This
here,
one.
the
Yeah,
second
this is
half
cool, yeah.
of this victory fanfare. I remember Krista, Lannon's wife, your brother's wife, she asked me, because I had arranged a version of this for a video that we had made.
Oh yeah.
And she really liked it. She wanted to use it as her phone, like ringtone or something like that. And I had lost the file where I had written the original
Was it
music.
the limit break one?
Yeah,
that
the
we did?
limit break
Yeah.
video. And so I had to go and kind of do it again. But like, I studied it a little more that time, and I was just like, man, this is one of the coolest pieces of music ever written for video games. I freaking love it. It's fantastic. Let's see. I know we've been going for an hour just on FF7, but there's a
geez.
few pieces
Okay.
that we cannot.
Overworld main theme. We have to do the overworld main theme.
Okay, so let's.
I think it's just called
sorry.
main
Before
theme.
we get to there, underneath the rotting pizza.
Oh, get that
This is the
bass.
one with the fat bass that I love. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. This song's so fun.
It's so good. If that
Yeah.
doesn't make you feel like you're walking through like a dangerous kind of
Yeah.
sketchy place in like a downtown area,
And yeah. Yeah, it definitely does.
like you got to watch your feet, you might step on some needles type of place, right?
Yeah.
So great. Let's see. So I really wanted to hit that one.
Ahead
okay,
on our way.
So I'm going to play this one real quick because I actually think of you every time I hear this song.
Yeah.
Because we were playing this together.
I remember this.
And
Because
it
we
was-
played this so many times using save states, trying to be the ones to get into Don Corneo.
We tried this
We're like,
section.
I know there's a way to do it.
It was not only the Don's mansion part.
Yeah.
It was also just like, I think it's Sector 5. Is it Sector 5? that this
yes.
is?
Yeah, yeah.
And that whole sequence that leads up to it, because all of it is accounted for in terms of like who he ends up choosing.
No, yes.
And we were
Yeah, the
trying
whole
to
thing.
like manipulate that and get him to choose us.
Yeah.
Or Cloud, I should say, and we kept messing it up. And we're like, dude, what? So we played it like over and over
Shimmers
and
or-
over and
yeah.
over again. And there's something so... I don't know how to describe this section of the game. It's so weird and like a little maybe uncomfortable, particularly for like young boys playing this at the time or whatever. But like, it's also just really, really engaging as like a story sequence. It's just like, man, these girls are in trouble. We got to help them. But like,
Yeah.
man, this place is so deranged and
Oh
messed
my
up.
gosh, it's
And
so messed up.
There's
yeah.
so many like weird things I'm not comfortable with going on here. Like,
Even more than I realized.
Yeah.
Too, playing the game, more as an adult, it's like, ooh, this is a really screwed up place.
Yeah.
This is a really screwed up place. Way even worse than I thought.
and you're cross-dressing to like get into it, and this is
Yeah.
all stuff that I don't know, like my mom wouldn't have liked it if she knew that I was playing the game. with
She
this
didn't like
stuff in it.
GoldenEye. Like you would not have, if she knew, you would not have been able to keep this game.
But like, and it's even still, people playing this for the first time, they're like, man, what is this? This is so
Yeah.
weird. This
Yeah.
part's so crazy. And it is. It's weird and it's crazy.
It is.
And it was
also
mostly-
one of our favorite parts of the entire game.
Yeah,
growing
exactly.
up.
That's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is it's actually one of the best parts of the game too.
It's memorable.
Super memorable. And it was
especially
actually
when we were young teenagers. It was just funny to just screw around and
Yeah. each part of the game was kind of directed by different people. They sort of split the team up in terms of event scenes, and like Nomura will do these parts, and Tetsuya Takahashi. Actually, I don't think Takahashi worked on this game. Never mind. Anyway, there was
Kitase,
other. Oh no, it wasn't him. It was the Matsuo. No,
Suzuki.
No. The guy who wrote Chrono Trigger. Gosh, I can't remember his name. Anyway. Can't remember, but there's a bunch of different people, and Toriyama, the director of Final Fantasy 13 and parts of 10, was the one who did that part.
Yeah.
Who did the Sector 5 slums and the Don Corneo part.
Well, he had fun.
Okay, so now let's move ahead here to... Okay, I got to play this just for a second because it's too fetching good. You did a tutorial on how to play
I
this
showed
on
people how to
guitar
play
one
this.
time.
Yeah, you can still find it.
Holding My Thoughts in My Heart's really good, but we're going to go to the main theme of the game.
Ahead on Our Way is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this song.
And there's a couple different versions of this. Like, there's... See, here, it has
several.
that sort of anxious kind of feel to it, right? That sort of uncertainty.
But then there's like Take to the Skies, which is the airship version.
Yeah.
That one's a lot more hopeful.
But so like they had the other track called Anxious Heart here a minute ago. But again, I feel like this game moves between essentially that feeling of an anxious heart into this feeling of this kind of like beautiful, hopeful thing. And that's exactly what this does. So this part here is all kind of like unsure, anxious, and then it transitions right here into the feeling you described with Tifa's theme.
Yeah. That hopeful feeling.
Yeah.
In the midst of the sadness, the hope that kind of rises up and comforts you. Yeah.
This is exactly so not what I would expect for an overworld map theme in an RPG. Like
I would expect more drum, the snare drum, like a marching, like a
and upbeat, like he was saying.
Let's go.
But people expect that embark on the journey type song.
Yeah.
And that's not at all what this is.
Right.
This is way more subdued than that.
Yeah.
And it's more of a contemplative sort of
so
piece.
Beautiful though.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. You're right, it's more contemplative. But then the music is leading your contemplations. Like your thoughts were, you're following wherever the muse takes you here.
Yeah.
But initially, it pulls you out of a dark place and kind of presents you into this new world. Mm-hmm. And the music track is doing that on its own.
And they head out on our way. So he almost always has a track called Ahead on Our Way. And they're almost always the best ones. This one's also very good. I like this one. This is more just kind of your town theme. I think it plays near like the Chocobo Farm or somewhere in that area. But it has kind of that feel to it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead a bit here to
the Chocobo.
The Genova.
Genova is a very recognizable song.
This is just another... There's nothing like this.
No, there isn't. It feels alien. It feels like an alien type thing.
Nothing. I've never heard anything like this anywhere else in any other game. Yeah, and you would think of all the games that people tried to copy,
right,
and try to be more like because of how successful Final Fantasy VII was. But like, I don't think I've ever heard a soundtrack that comes anywhere close to sounding like Final Fantasy VII soundtrack.
No, and this is so strange to use these otherworldly alien instruments and to get that feel, and then put some like a drum set to it and some very human sounding instruments combined into it as well, because you got the X-Files and you've got different songs that use a similar instrument set that are going for maybe a similar type of sound, but they don't do it the way that he does it. And he's not afraid to just like throw a drum set into your alien. And it's like, whoa, now we're not alien anymore. Drum sets, that makes you think of a person playing and a beat, right? Alien music tends to maintain that weird ethereal, UFO kind of like synth sound. And this song just, Uematsu just says, oh, I'm breaking that rule.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you have a rule? Oh, that's nice. I'm breaking it.
Actually, I know we've been on this for so long, but there was something back
this
here.
Should just be an FF7 video.
Maybe it will be. There was one back here.
In which case, take your time.
Where I wanted. Remember how? I don't know if it was last time or the time before. we had talked about how he'll use the preludes, arpeggiated kind of sound underneath.
I heard it in a song from this soundtrack. I can't remember which one.
I think it is this song. I think it's Anxious. Or did I click on Anxious Heart? Which one did I click on? Oh, okay. So this is Anxious Heart. But he'll kind of do that underneath certain pieces. Okay. So he'll use the prelude or something similar to it, which will sit underneath another melody, and it'll give it that. You can hear it right there.
And the intro, I love that you're pointing this out to me. The intro to this song was so mysterious and strange, and then it moves seamlessly into this, which is so different. Yeah, it's fascinating. This is very cool.
And that
I
gives
never
it
realized
its uniquely
that this was that
Final Fantasy feel, because it's got almost the Final Fantasy song that all people know.
And then it moves
right
into
underneath it.
And this song, this is beautiful. All of the songs on the soundtrack are so good.
There is not a miss on this soundtrack. There's not one.
But this also gives me a lot of that nostalgic feeling as well.
It's so
and
good.
It's so cool that it kind of moves into this from something else.
Yeah. Okay, so I gotta do this one too, just to tell a funny story. So this is the Rufus Shinra sort of like ceremony thing, right? That's broadcast on TV, and you go dress up like a soldier and try to like do the march.
Yes, I remember that. You gotta get it all
section.
right.
So you mentioned a story from your mission when you got the piano collections.
Yeah.
This might take a second to like explain. So for those of you who don't know anything more about Mormon missionaries other than they wear white shirts and ties and they come knocking on your door and bother you all the time, want to talk about Jesus or whatever.
Got a little name tag. Bike helmets.
We both served Mormon missions.
Yeah.
And I was in Las Vegas. You were in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the rules, which are, at least at the time, were set upon missionaries, they have lightened up a bit over the years. We weren't allowed to call our parents more than twice a year.
Yeah, twice a year. Yeah.
We couldn't use computers other than one day a week to email.
Yep. And even then, only for like 1 hour, maybe.
Yeah, we couldn't have cell phones. We couldn't have any video games. We couldn't read anything. No music.
Except for
outside of like
the
church
Mormon
music,
Tabernacle Choir.
Basically.
Yeah.
There were some very, very rare exceptions, but your mission president had to approve them.
Right.
Same with like reading material. It was all religious reading material.
All had to be approved.
There was even like the activities you were allowed to do on the 1 day a week where you weren't proselyting, where you would mainly would just go grocery shopping. You would do your laundry and other chores, and then maybe you'd get together with some other guys and play some basketball or some other outside activity.
But you still got to work that evening, so there was really no days off.
There were really no days off. I brought with me and had sent to me against the rules. Basically all the Final Fantasy music, which I justified as being, well, it's like classical in a sense. Hold on, this sound can't go away yet. Hold on, I gotta go back. So, it's a very rigid and strict and just kind of tense sort of environment, almost military-esque in a way.
Yeah, I've heard it. That
your entire schedule is set for you, and you're supposed to do this at this time, and this at this time, and this at this time.
Yeah.
It was not easy for me at all. I am a person who very much values my independence and freedom, and so as much as we talked about this in the past too.
It was a Patreon video.
Like in school and things like that, I tried very hard to be like a 4.0 GPA, straight A student and things like that. Sorry, I'm going back to the beginning of this. Long story short, in that environment, I had to find some ways to
let off steam,
let off steam, to not live this way because I just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
so
me too.
For a while, I didn't get caught for at least 3 weeks. I had as an answering machine for our apartment's phone, this song would play in the background.
Like the OST?
My companion, so we had it like playing on a loudspeaker.
That's funny.
And it was, so I'll go back to the beginning here. There it goes. You've reached the residence of Elder Brown and Elder whoever from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As it built up to its fanfare. If you'd like to read, we can't answer the phone right now, but please leave your message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And we're each taking turns going off on it. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it was the bishop of our ward finally called us and heard that and was and he immediately called the mission president or something.
Yeah,
and it was you guys can't do this.
This is the fun thing about being a missionary. There's all these rules, but it's also a bunch of 19-year-old boys.
Yeah.
So this stuff happens. We found ways to have fun.
Control 19-year-old kids for that long. Anyways, and we played D&D and a bunch of other stuff we probably wouldn't technically allowed to do. But
that all depends on how your character bio went. Just kidding.
So the Gold Saucer's one we probably got.
Gold Saucer's so much fun.
I think I did another one in a different area with this one in the back.
Just circus music.
Yeah, just messing around.
Well, we've got to hit Eris theme, but I guess it doesn't play until a little bit later. It plays earlier, but in this soundtrack, it doesn't come.
It's listed a little
till
later.
After later.
Here it is. Why does it do that? It's with almost every song, it skips the first part.
I'm wondering if it's. Yeah.
Here it is. Yeah, it's
the
possibly
silence.
the most beloved.
Those are what in the industry are called pregnant pauses. Those pauses, that silence is filled with meaning.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just waiting for the song to continue, but it's playing with that silence in a way, especially, this song was written for a specific event, though it is played multiple times throughout the game. And once again, you also get that wonderful melancholic sadness that hurts so good. And that's why this song, as you said, that's why this song just fits the spot. It's
fits the game perfectly. Cosmo
Canyon's fun.
Is one of the best tracks from the game. Again, this one really juxtaposes that industrial Midgar.
Yeah, with some
Shinra
kind of
feel.
hand drums a little bit.
It feels a little more
human.
tribal music.
Yeah.
Something a little more connected to nature.
More connected to nature, yeah.
Yeah. We got to wait for the good part. There it is.
This is one of the early songs that I learned on guitar when we were first learning how to play. And I was like, dude, I learned the Red 13 song. It's so good.
Yep. Of course, I'm going to skip over a bunch here. I'm telling you.
Well, because Interrupted by Fireworks is an incredible song. Also very deep and life-changing for me.
Let's see. Hold on. Because I think before that, there was Those Chosen by the Planet,
it's at
which
the bottom.
brings in more of this bell.
The Sephiroth bell.
This is one of the tracks that stood out the most to me and inspired me the most. I remember making games in RPG Maker and trying to write music in Melody Assistant.
That bell in. Melody Assistant.
That bell and that kind of beat to it.
Yeah.
That ominous, super ominous feel to it that this has.
Very.
There's another.
Of course, the idea of the bell tolling.
There's another game from Squaresoft, the sequel to Seiken of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 3. I think they call it Trials of Mana now.
Oh, okay.
And in Duran's Path, it has a song a little similar to this when the wizard shows up, the Crimson Wizard, and it's going through massacring all the soldiers, and he tries to fight him, and he can't hit him and stuff. It has a similar type of feel to this. Again, I think I associated Squaresoft with a couple of different.
Well, FF6, of course, at the beginning has that bell theme as well.
Mm-hmm. It's just this being sort of the prelude to a Sephiroth appearance is just perfect.
This is whoever comes at the end of this song, whatever this song's building up to, that their entrance, the red carpet is laid out for them. You are ready for it. It's so fun.
Let's see.
Gotta do Interrupted by Fireworks, but where is it?
Wutai is great, but we're going to skip that for now. Here it is, Interrupted by Fireworks. Oh, yeah. This is while you're in the Gold Saucer, right? And you have the date with whatever character that you've... Again, and it's using leitmotifs of different pieces. It's, oh my god.
Possibly the first just few notes of the prelude.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah. And that bell, the little chimes.
Again, that duality of feeling, the melancholy, the sadness, which is really, I think, carried there, but there's going to be a part that comes in here in a second that turns it a little bit into something more hopeful and sweet, and like appreciating the moment that you're in. Because this moment is beautiful and important, and Cloud's too often looking to gotta chase Sephiroth, gotta in the future, and
that bell. He's always hearing that bell
here in the moment, right?
And then right here, the chord changes right here.
Yeah,
gets a little ominous, and then it resolves beautifully,
and then kind of repeats there. Let's see, which ones do I have to? For sure.
Well, Take to the Skies, but I don't know what it's called here.
High Wind.
This is it.
Yeah. This is the one that you would expect from a world map theme.
This typically. Is what. Yes, and it's not until the end of the game that you really
finally
get
an airship, a proper airship.
Yeah.
Not the tiny Bronco, which just like used to go on the shallows of the water. And of course, this is a leitmotif on the main theme.
Yeah.
But built in more of a triumphant kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get towards the end here and wrap up. So, while One Winged Angel is the one that rightfully became the famous boss piece, I actually think Birth of a God, which plays in the form right before that, is
Birth
really,
of a God is
really
powerful.
good.
Yeah.
Like this is a little bit underrated, I feel.
Yeah,
in terms of like
if
battle themes of the Final Fantasy series, because One Winged Angel gets all the praise and all the eyeballs and all the credit here,
of course. Yeah.
But Birth of the God is kind of like the main phase of that boss fight, the first phase of
early
it.
on.
And it's really good. That little bend. Again, it feels very much like a rock piece.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that
a Pink Floyd experimental style, Dream Theater kind of maybe. Yeah,
100%. And you got that almost
organ,
but it's not an organ. It's the keyboard sound that you would hear in a band like that.
Oh,
that's Uematsu's. That's Uematsu's instrument in the band.
Yes, exactly.
That part right there.
It's that.
Right? Yeah. Okay, One Winged Angel. Have to hear this one before the end. It's so chaotic and dissonant and just.
I do remember showing this song to my father.
Really?
And I believe it was the Advent Children version. And afterwards, I don't think he liked the song.
Really?
But I remember afterwards we played another song and he said something like, and you know my dad, it is very unusual for him to say anything like this. He said, well, anything would be better than what we just heard. And I was like, oh man, that song was so good. What do you mean?
Oh, that's the version that has like the actual rock
the guitar and all
band
that.
in behind it and stuff.
And the pinch harmonics for the, I love it.
It's very dissonant though. It's very, I could see why he would say something like that. It's not like.
It's so unusual.
It's uncomfortable.
Yes, it is.
It's tense. It's not resolving at all.
Anywhere.
No, it's just like oh gosh.
And it's funny because my dad is just so positive and he would never criticize any of my other music, but he didn't like the song very much.
And then here comes that choir with.
So I didn't know that this had its inspiration from Carmina Burana.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. I hear it now, of course.
Super great.
Sephiroth.
Okay, my last one I'm going to go here is with World Crisis, and this is basically the resolution of the story. So like the game's final FMV sequence that leads into its ending. And I just find this to be one of the most beautiful pieces of music from the game too.
Oh, this is so good. To hear Aerith's song fully orchestrated like this. So the gaps are filled in now.
Yep.
And we're hearing the full song now.
And he's
because the way this movie ends.
And then turns into Tifa and the whole place is coming down. Because he was in the live stream for a second.
Right, I was going to say, there's this beauty here that almost like you're you're finally figuring out what's happening here, just as things are breaking. Like, oh, this is the live stream. This is how it works. Oh, here we go. I'm seeing people I know. This song.
And now he's with Tifa
so good.
as they're sitting there talking back and forth. and he's saying like, he's saying, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's basically talking about Aerith while she's there with him. And, there was that whole
It's a complicated
love triangle jealousy thing going on.
Yeah.
And so he starts with one arm, like lifting her out, like climbing out of the little pit that they're in.
That's right. Hey, that Mako really helps the muscles.
Pool down at the bottom. And then the high wind is going to come in and grab them here in a second. Let me skip forward a bit. And then they fly up and they see that Meteor has not been stopped at all.
Right.
It's still coming out. Like, what are we going to do? Like, and then Holy comes in and like it doesn't work. It doesn't stop it. It's just, it moves in so many different places, but it's the part, where it seems like there's nothing's gonna work. Meteor's gonna hit. There's nothing they can do, and then all of a sudden, okay, sorry. This is where it's like, okay, you see all those like red tornadoes and stuff, like, just like taking everything out. It's so freaking crazy, and it's just like, dude, we can't do anything at all.
This.
Holy didn't work. There's nothing. And then, out of nowhere, the Gaia hypothesis comes to fruition.
Reifustream.
Come on. There it is. I love this part.
Yeah.
Like the whole time,
this is cool.
Everything that the characters fought and toiled and tried to do to stop this.
Yeah.
And it was like, the planet is the one in control here. And there's so many places when we eventually talk about Final Fantasy VII, I feel like when people analyze the story of this game, there are certain things that everyone likes to focus on. And I'm not saying this to denigrate anybody, because those are important parts. We're talking about Shinra and corporate greed and the environmentalist message and all these sorts of things. But there's other parts to this. A lot of the stuff that comes from Bugenhagen, actually, that I think are missed in terms of like understanding the ending here and why it's important that it ends the way that it does. Because a lot of people felt, oh, this falls flat. I don't know what happens to the characters.
When I first played it.
Did they live?
Yeah.
Did they die?
Me too.
That I think unless you are really taking to heart some of the things Bugenhagen says, not only back at Cosmo Canyon, but when they go to the Northern Crater. Is it Northern Crater? Yeah, I think so. And he they read those old runes and things like that. Like the planet's will, right? The Gaia hypothesis, this whole thing that Sakaguchi was sort of playing with and trying to like incorporate in the story. The life of the planet itself, it has its own will and its own plan.
Yeah.
And in the end, everything that they did, they freaking went to space to try to blow this thing up. They like tried to activate this holy materia and all this other stuff. Everything. They tried to shoot cannons and And in the end, the planet saves itself.
Right.
Like the planet's will is what's really in charge here, and the sanctity of life, which is in the hands of the planet's will. And what it chooses is best for its future is what's important, not what these individuals are trying to
on
achieve.
its behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah. As if they know.
Exactly.
They say nature is the best teacher, right?
Yeah.
And goodness, I want to talk more about that. but maybe
I think
it won't be too long before we
leaving off point.
That review.
We were supposed to talk about 3 games and we talked about 1.
We talked about 1.
But I tried to lead off with my bias at the beginning. I can't help it. This is my favorite one. It is the one, the game in this series that touched my heart the most in terms of what the story is saying. And it says many things, many more things than one. And its soundtrack was so important in sort of delivering that. And every track I listen to, I'm transported into that time period where I was seeing those things for the first time and learning those things and trying to think about them on another level. What we do now basically on a weekly basis on this show was born in me when I played this game.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think I ever thought about a story on a more than a cursory level before I played this. And, you know, that's not to say that this is, you know, the greatest story of all time or something like that, but it was just the right time and place for me as a, you know, 11, 12-year-old or whatever it was, where I was mature enough to start thinking about stories on a different level. And this happened to be the one that was the first one that I had that experience with.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. It really did. And the music was a huge part of it. It was a huge part of it. And so I go through that track list, and again, there's not one that I want to skip because I'm remembering, oh yeah, that part. Oh yeah, that part.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's so perfect for that part. That fits so well for that part. And it's an incredible, incredible soundtrack.
Yeah.
One of the very best of all time.
And I just love that when the game's over, you don't have to sit down and play the game again. You can put on the music and you can re-experience, you know,
Go back through
parts
again.
of the game just through the music. And the music is strong enough and good enough to where it still carries through all of the themes and all of the powerful moments, you know.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII was special in so many different ways. So 7 came out in 97, right?
Yep.
But 6 came out in 95?
Yeah, I think it was 2 years before, like a year and a half or something.
A year and a half?
Something like that, yeah.
Gosh, that's not, I mean, in today terms,
And
that's not a lot of time.
The only reason it wasn't just exactly 1 year is because Chrono Trigger came in between.
That's right.
And in the early planning stages of FF7, a lot of those developers were pulled off to go help on Chrono Trigger.
Right.
Like Yoshinori Kitase, who directed this game,
Yeah.
and other people. So there was a short period of time where they kind of put this on the side for a second to go help finish that game first. And then they came back to it. And there were some ideas at the beginning, because it was a very different game at the beginning, that then got put into games like Parasite Eve and then into the movie Spirits Within instead of this, the New York.
And even I'd heard some of it went into Chrono Trigger itself.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it did.
But this game was special, man. Means a lot to me too. This is my favorite one as well. And the soundtrack, you just can't, like, video games are so powerful. They're so immersive. They're so meaningful that whatever game is your favorite and you hear the song from that game, I'm sorry. Like, I'm having a different experience than people who didn't play it when I played it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the music isn't still good. It is. But there is a whole extra layer of meaning with that music that, you know, my personal experience brings it. But even outside of that, this is just really good music.
Yeah.
This is just objectively good. It's powerful. It's unique. It's so unique, as you've mentioned many times. And I don't know. Uematsu is going to in the future ones. He is going to maybe temper that a little bit. The sounds, the music won't be as unique, but he is still continuing to grow as a composer. You know, even though he did this more experimental thing, he's going to write maybe some more technically better songs in the future. But as a whole, this album, this, you know, collection of songs is probably going to go down even in 100 years from now. They'll be like, that was his collectively. That was his best work.
I think so, but there's a whole lot more to get through, which we will do next time and the time after that. And then we'll probably be coming in that whatever follows that into the time when we start getting a lot of new composers for the Final Fantasy series. But there was definitely a peak during this era right here where he was just hitting on all cylinders. He was at his best. He was writing, like you said, like a track probably every day or every other day.
Several a week.
For years at a time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that has to some degree, wear on a person. It creates some burnout, and I need some help, guys. I can't keep doing this forever.
He has said more recently he doesn't think he's ever going to be able to score a full game anymore because it's really stressful. Yeah. And he still writes songs here and there, but to score a full game is difficult. Yeah. But whatever muse he has that inspires him, Goodness, man, that's really something to pair
I
his
think
inspiration with
I
his
think he has
genius.
said that his muse is essentially walking his dog.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
That's so
that's
cool.
pretty much it.
That's so cool.
He just goes on walks with his dog.
I love that. Get outside, touch some grass, go breathe the fresh air, and then come back in and write some music. That's how it ought to be.
Yep. And with that, we will leave for this episode. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week for FF8 and FF9. I am determined to do them both,
I think
so
we'll be
that
able to.
we don't
I think we'll
we
be able
don't
to.
carry this on into a 20 episode series, because that would just be crazy.
Yeah, that'll be
See you
wild.
guys next week. Peace out.